Call to order the County Commission regular meeting for July 16th, 2026. At 6:32 p.m. We call the roll.
Baldwin.
Here.
Patrick.
Here.
Gardner.
Here.
Lachey.
Present.
Marina.
Here.
Raphael.
Here.
And Mann.
Here. Next item is approval of the agenda. So moved. Second. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? Being none, agenda is approved. In our packets, start on page 3, you have the minutes from the June 18th, 2026 meeting. Any comments, changes? If not, give a motion to approve. So moved. Support. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Minutes are approved. Which moves us on to first public comment of the evening. These public comments would be on agenda items. If you'd like to speak, you would come up to the podium or you raise your hand online. However, we have no one in the room and we don't see any hands online. So I don't need to go through all the details. We'll go ahead and close out the first public comments of the evening. It takes us down to new business and we have 2 items. The first item is the Planning Commission's survey summary. And then we have the comprehensive master plan. So we'll kick it off with Grayson kind of walking us through the Planning Commission survey summary, which begins on page 8 in your packet.
Yes, so I just hitting a few highlights on the questions that you guys kind of went through and seeing where you guys landed with similar thoughts and where you maybe had some differences here. It was pretty high thoughts for having a stronger emphasis on preserving the existing neighborhood character while allowing for appropriate opportunities for future growth and redevelopment. Excuse me. One of the dividing areas was though when you guys started talking about scale and then kind of allowing intensification in the downtown area. Seemed like you guys were split pretty half and half on that. So that would be a good point to kind of discuss and see where you guys might end up on that. And then it seemed that we were all in agreement that encouraging increased density and mixed use redevelopment in the downtown area was not the biggest goal that we're trying to achieve. However, you guys all seemed very aligned on expanding walkability and non-motorized transportation. So we'll definitely take some extra time when we go through that chapter. We'll also make it a point to have some more discussion about short-term rental impacts when we go through more housing information, as well as economic development. And then the future vision for Saugatuck, I thought that you guys were pretty well aligned there as well. And so in our master plan exercise workbook here, I had a little exercise for us to kind of go through there. But if you guys had any questions or comments about, how you guys aligned and looking at the results of your survey, that would be great.
I felt like it was pretty straightforward. I thought that it represented the group. I'm happy with the results, actually.
Yeah, I think the one thing that Grace and I is on the hit upon, shows that we have a lot of consistency in a lot of the views that we have. I think as we start to get into the master plan, we start talking about like future use. It will be, since we are somewhat split on, what people mean by. There we go. Sorry. No, so I'm just thinking, with the 4-3 kind of split between, no one says to aggressively, try to do it, but it was like either keep it, what was the term that they used was maintain current scale intensity or allow moderate intensification. So I guess I'd like to kind of hear you don't have to disclose which one you are, but some thoughts on what is meant by maintain versus the moderate kind of growth, because I think that one of the things that we have to do when we're looking at the master plan, and you're looking at not only what we want the city to be, but it's got to be the reality of how we plan for what's happening within the city. And we are affected, we are still the commercial center for the tri-community. And although we can't control what gets approved in Douglas or Township, but inevitably there's, 400 new homes that have been proposed and may end up getting approved, which would change the population of the area by 10 to 15%. And if you continue to be the commercial hub for that, it's like somehow you have to kind of factor that in, and trying to maintain status quo may be a challenge without actually being willing to kind of say, we may need more businesses, we may need more development, more uses of some of our public land. And so that's kind of what I was curious to hear those who were talking about the maintaining. Do they just kind of mean maintaining the small town character, or maintaining exactly the borders and businesses and commercial that we have currently?
Oh, I think I'm one of the ones who said maintain current scale and intensity. The other one is, kind of one of those fuzzy ones, moderate intensification where appropriate. Well, yeah,
Right.
where appropriate. That's one of those, honestly, one of those phrases that for me, I like the sky is blue. So I don't know, just spitballing it like, okay, how do we intensify? Do we start building 4-story buildings? Do we, I think do expand what we define as downtown. If those are what people are thinking of in terms of intensification where appropriate, no, I think, I think just the other thing I'll say real quick is the other thing, just a few years ago, we had a lot of empty storefronts. I don't know a single empty storefront in town. There may be, but I don't know of any. And that's a big change. And so if we're able to maintain that, I think that would be fine. But again, I'm not opposed to development where appropriate. So whatever that is.
No, it's,
I kind of feel the same way, and I'm probably like you. I'm wondering which way I answered the survey question, because I'm kind of in the middle on that. But for me, the intensification would be things like that Water Street development next to Sagataco. That is a mild intensification, but it's not something out of character with what's around there. So that's what I have in mind. Not let's build a 3-story, residential mixed use development and on the waterfront.
okay. Yeah, because I think that, go ahead.
I was a moderate intensification. I think it's in our transition zones because the city's going to have to get, I don't want to build up. I don't want to have big high rises, but I just think we're going to have to grow our border a little bit of some of that business work. And we have our transition zones that sort of allow that.
May I ask why?
Because I think it's to Steve's point of the 500 extra families that are going to be coming downtown and using our facilities in our restaurants and our stores.
I fell on the moderate intensification, but it's with the idea, like what you were saying, if somebody said, hey, can we start adding 2 stories? Because I know one of the things that I saw in some other cities about our size, like in their commercial district, they were talking about if they added a story or 2 for like affordable housing or something, but then it changes the character all of a sudden. So I'm not in favor that you're going to have like 3-story buildings going up, even in the downtown area. Definitely, we know we've already put the waterfront preservation in. But the idea that moderate intensification where appropriate would be, again, like that example, are we thinking in our transition areas, can we have types of businesses that cater not so much to maybe like, the storefront type of things, but, we had a tourist group I was talking to the other day, and they were saying they used to come here and they loved coming here, but this hour and a half that they had to wait for dinner, they're going to go someplace else. So the idea of having another, 1 or 2 restaurants or something that could possibly be located within, some of the other zones, since we really don't have space for it in the existing, commercial, I see that as something, if Coral Gables, as we kind of talked about, was to make a change, they'd have to meet all the rules of our waterfront preservation, but, that would still be kind of viewed as, obviously it'd be growth, but it would be growth without us having to do anything about it because we've already kind of handled that. So that's why the encouraged density, I was like, no, I was glad to see that no one, was out there saying, hey, man, we really have got to try to push for changes.
I think I was moderate, a lot of moderate intensification where appropriate, but I think I'm like Commissioner Baldwin, I'd probably say, next to, or well, you said Sagataco, didn't you?
Yeah, the building right next to
Yeah,
them.
I would say the former Big Lake Outfitters, I think that's probably a level beyond moderate, in my opinion, and how I look at moderate is what we've approved, 2 doors down. With that extension on that building and pumpernickels and just allowing more modern uses out of older buildings and what we can do within it. And I mean, an older example, of course, is something like where the Mitten Brewing Company is now, like allowing something that was a residential property in a specific zone that can be intensified for, commercial use.
Yeah, because I was even thinking like like the house that's for sale right next to Wickwood. It's like, okay, we're known as the art coast, of Michigan, but we've got what, 2 galleries in town or something, so it'd be like, that'd be like a perfect thing if somebody could take that, and kind of, make it a gallery. It fits into the transitional neighborhood. So it's not really intensifying or having any major changes. It's just moving, businesses that would be appropriate, or, if we were looking at, I'm open to, at least for myself, and thinking about if we had other type of overnight lodging, type of establishments that's not a full hotel, kind of going in at some point so that you can kind of once again increase the tourism. Parking, of course, is always going to be the issue. You put in, whether it's a bed and breakfast that's got 6 additional rooms versus a single family home, that's going to be, well, where do those people park and everything? But, I'm at least open if there was a business owner who came to us with something like that. I'd look at that and say, okay, I'd be open to discussing it. And I would even think that we may need, when we get into looking at a number of hotel rooms, a number of lodging accommodations we have for the tourism as part of like the economic, that we may see that compared to other cities of our size. And that's one of the things when we are doing that, Grayson, and with David, I'd like to kind of see some comparisons when we get into that tourist part of it, how we compare to some of the other cities as far as number of rooms that are available within our city limit and then in the tri-community, for accommodating the tourism that we have. Because right now, I think a lot of our tourism is day tourism because we're limited on overnight accommodations. Chris, you got thoughts? Yeah.
I didn't want to jump in.
It's okay.
Somebody
No.
who had spoken, but I know it's very much apples and oranges, but you look at downtown Grand Haven. And what downtown Grand Haven was 10 years ago, 12 years ago versus what it is now. It's a completely different community. And a lot of it is, and I, for good or bad, but it is a very different community, and they certainly have intensified and built up and renovated a lot of buildings and so I think people come here because it's cute. And I think we want to keep it cute.
Absolutely.
And adding an art gallery in that house would do nothing for people who are waiting an hour and a half for dinner.
I'm just using one more example of whether it's
fun.
whether it's a restaurant that would go along Water Street or Mason or places that are kind of where you don't have something currently.
This is a very challenging discussion.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that need to be balanced. Where I start to come down on this is I was in the moderate development camp. And whereas I used to think about Sagatuck as just being this one community, we have several different communities. We've got the suburbs over on the west side of the river. You've got the downtown urban center, which I live in, which is a completely different community from anywhere, from the hill.
Exactly.
The people on the west side of the river. They don't feel the intensity of the activities downtown.
Correct.
That correct.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Just the nature of it. So We have a population of 850, which is on the decline. Our population is aging. It's still a community, as Commissioner Lachey said. I think that's due why a lot of people come here, the historic character, the geographics that we have is beautiful, right? That's important to maintain. But I think why people like to come here too is the people that are here, right? The people that love this town, that chose it. I didn't choose to live here. Someone 5 generations ago. So I'm benefiting from a choice made a long time ago, but I love this place. So I extend that appreciation for community to the people that come to the community, right? Stop and talk to me on the street. That's what I think part of the planning process should involve is how do we continue to encourage to get people that want to come here and live here full time, bring families here. Which is a challenge because of the demographics, but I think that's part of the planning process too, is just not what development we want to prefer. More businesses, which will essentially take spaces away from people that could be living in a house or building a house or finding a way to. You know, I'm not too comfortable with increased density because that would just create more. So that's the challenge I have is, okay, how do we maintain that character, which is talked about here, preservation of historic character, which also includes people.
Right.
So how do we do that? You know, building more restaurants and bars, or building more is all just, it's just gonna increase everything. You know, if you build, you know, like parking, I know we've had this discussion, if you build more parking, all you're gonna do is you're gonna increase the wait time at the bar.
Without having additional
They
ones.
can't push more meals out the door, they can't
Yep.
hire more people,
Yep.
it's just, it's a matter of more. And, you know, for me, speaking as someone who's been here a while, and someone who's been here a while. I actually like the relaxed atmosphere after the season. That allows us a chance to recharge our batteries. To enjoy the community, be able to go to some of the restaurants that we choose not to go to in the summer because they're overwhelmed. So that's the balance, that's why I was in more of a moderate camp and also too, it's just great to see infrastructure capacity was one of the top priorities because. I've talked about this at council, I've talked about it here is. With all this development going on in Douglas and the township. You know where they want to go on Friday night, Saturday night?
Here,
Right down here.
exactly.
I will get them into town, not in the car. Get them down safely. And make them feel as though it's not a, you know, you're not shoulder to shoulder, right? How do you maintain that? That's hard. How do you maintain that character? And so anyway, those are just kind of my thoughts about how you balance all of that. Residents' needs, along with the economic vitality of the town, which is important to all of us. How do you get there?
No, because what I've always wondered especially when I started looking through the numbers, what we'll get to as part of like the writing for the master plan. So we're kind of hitting a little bit of both in this agenda items. But when you look at the number of households and the growth that they had in Douglas and in township, does the city of Saugatuck somewhat change and have to kind of accept the fact that the real residential growth is not going to happen in the city of Saugatuck? The city of Saugatuck is going to continue to be the commercial hub. So should we be planning more about how do we maximize and make it so that we will continue to have that commercial part? Yes, we'll continue to have residential, but the chance of most families moving, there's probably a higher likelihood that if a family's moving in, they would move into township or Douglas. Just because the size of homes and affordability of what we do have currently in the city. So in my mind, I factor that in, and you don't want to see a declining population in your own city. But at the same time, the population of the area is going up. But unless Douglas and Township started doing more commercial development, then it's still kind of, like you said, everybody still comes down here. So we have to kind of plan for how do we handle that. But at the same time, still satisfy the residents that you have, you know, so it's a tough balance.
I had a person a few weeks ago make this comment to me. It was pretty harsh. Has been around here for a long time, works the beach for years and known those communities. He said, you know, Russ, this has been a resort community. It's not just become a resort. And that community word, which is what I'm talking about, is how do you maintain that community feel? From both the resident standpoint as well as just the character of the community, along with the resort that people love and enjoy. That was a pretty harsh comment, and That was his opinion, but I can see where he's coming from. It's just. How do you get there?
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
And again, I don't think anyone at this time, no one would say, okay, we're gonna automatically recommend you're gonna make some major changes, but it's, because it's basically as you have to have people bring it to you. But when we're talking about it, we have to think as we're moving forward, especially in future land use, do we need, to have even a larger transitional, or what does transitional really mean? And what type of businesses would fit into that?
Yeah, and I think back to Commissioner Badger's comment about this world is changing so quickly in terms of business models, the retail business models are just changing dramatically. And we may have people coming to us in the future that will come with business ideas that we can't even imagine today. And how do we plan for that to allow those changes to take place? And is it appropriate for the community? I mean, we can't even imagine what those are going to look like, and I think that's part of what we need to, as a planning commission, for a master plan, to be able to react to that when those come to us. I mean, other communities around us are facing similar questions for their zoning as well. I've heard some stories from different townships around us that are challenged by some of this, and they sometimes don't. So I think that's part of what we have to be thinking about is, what is it? Can we anticipate what those models might look like? While maintaining the historic character, density, et cetera, that we, decide we want to try to maintain. So it's a challenge.
I think we can see that the township and Douglas are gonna grow. There's gonna be more people here that are local looking to use our entertainment area.
Yeah. And I know that Douglas is, at least things that people I've talked to, they're trying to figure out ways to actually add more commercial. But they gotta, what do they call it, the chicken or the egg, or, it's like, they gotta get the people who are willing to come there versus coming down here. But, so it's like, do you build it and they will come, or do you, wait until you kind of have it? But there's also, in the future, we may see that they pull some of that commercial, growth away. But right now, there's no changes. I think, township, I think there's somebody's talking about the potential of a strip center. I don't know if that was just something I heard. It was hearsay
I
or.
thought they were going to try to turn part of Blue Star into more of a downtown feeling place, but I haven't seen any specifics on that.
I mean, that's just kind of heard that in the last month. But I didn't know when they said downtown. I didn't know if they also they wanted to have like a strip center, which I'm opposed to.
Walkable area and Blue Star.
Yes, yeah, I
Talk
think
about
that's-
that.
Okay.
This is run by it as part of our LA Sewer and Water Authority long-term agreement discussion with the village and with the township. Is that they told us at one of the recent meetings that they have approximately 400 plus units approved coming online.
They said, yeah.
400 units. And all multifamily, they're not gonna be all full-time residents, but that's 400 new units for people to live in.
Right.
Quite a few vacation rentals, second homeowners and so forth, so.
It's 2 people, minimum 2 people per, that's 800 more people, doubling in our
Still
city.
look at the
numbers are pretty.
correct. Some of them will probably be scaled back, but even that's when we were talking, Grayson and I this week, I said, whether it's 350 or 500, someplace in there, that's a fairly short-term addition. And they still have, open land that, that they have the capability of expanding, and growing on. And then we haven't even talked about, if anything was happening, with Finville, but I mean, it's all separate, but obviously they come in, to our region.
Can I say something about this other pie chart real quick?
Sure.
Stronger emphasis on preservation of existing neighborhood character. I don't know if those two things, if they are mutually exclusive, and just to illustrate that point. And I haven't dug too deep into it, just something that I thought about. There are 2 houses that were recently sold on Allen Street up on. On one side, they tore it down, building a huge house. It was a smaller house, they built a huge one across the street, 125-year-old home. They bought it, they want to keep it as is, but they're trying to do modifications to it and they're running into issues with it. So I heard they're thinking like it would make more sense just for us to carry this down and we can build it exactly how we want it. So I do think there is something there, and we want to preserve neighborhood character, but can we be more lenient when when we're trying to allow, again, modern uses
Correct.
of older homes? And I don't think there's anything we can really figure out at this point, but I just want to make that.
Yeah, I think that will be something that we have to kind of, you know, look at, I don't know, like, as part of the overall master plan is like, is the goal to try to help somebody maintain or modify an existing property versus a tear down? I mean, many of us who have had the opportunity of being over in the Detroit area, you look at some of like the Birminghams and the Royal Oaks where, you know, that became the thing you did. You bought the old house, tore it down, and then you built kind of lot line to lot line. If you had a 10-foot setback, you got a 10-foot setback, and then the house starts. And that totally changed the character of many of those. And those were like, more boutique-y suburbs.
Well, the character, I'm sorry,
Go ahead. No?
the character of the neighborhood on the hill has changed dramatically already. The predominance of 2-bedroom, 1-bath cottages, 1-story, is absolutely in the minority now,
Yeah.
and the predominance of either through large homes with auxiliary living units over garages, for better or worse. But I mean, if you're saying preserve the character of the neighborhood, well, the traditional, in my mind, and you know better than I do, having been here your whole life, the traditional character of a lot of our housing stock was summer cottages throughout town. And so I think it is too. So when, to your point, when we're talking about maintaining the character, that is kind of a fungible film also, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it.
For this exercise, I like that facial, that's the
Yeah.
facial character, because once you start getting what's behind the door, then I think it gets a little, like you said.
But even on Allegan Street, there's some that are
Well, absolutely, yeah.
2-bedroom, 1-bath with, well, that can sleep 12 people. And, no basement or whatever, and so, that it has changed.
Sure.
So anyway.
No, I think that, I guess when I'm looking at it long term, as we're, setting priorities in the future for like reviewing, zones, reviewing ordinances, those become kind of questions that we would kind of bring up. It's like, what are the things that we can put in if you want to encourage one or the other? Like you're talking about, if they're trying to make modifications to an existing 125-year-old one, but they're running into so many obstacles that it becomes easier to tear it down. So then if we wanted to try to preserve, you have to kind of say, okay, well, what could we possibly do that would give them a little easier path, and use it as an example. It's not something we'd be doing tomorrow, but I'm saying it might be something you put on your agenda that's 2 or 3 years out. Anything else on the survey part that we want to kind of discuss? And there is a lot of overlap when we get into the first chapters that they have drafted. And if not, we'll move on to the comprehensive master plan, chapters 1 through 3. And I will say to both Grayson and Dave, I think you've done a really nice job in kind of this first draft and, in the items that were here. And I found a lot of interesting things myself. So I don't know how you want to, Grayson, I know you've got these dots and stuff that you kind of wanted to do. So I'm going to turn it over to you and you kind of talk about how you and David would like to have us walk through this.
Yeah, so I thought that this would just be a nice place to kind of get the conversation going, which you guys have already done a great job with, but maybe just going through the higher topics of each chapter and saying, if you think that, like for the introduction, if you're kind of like, that sounds right, there really isn't more to add to that, then we can give it a green. I'm assuming much more of these will be yellow. And then I just kind of wanted to get some notes to take from you guys and like what you were seeing in that and how it was coming across to you.
I guess I had a big picture question. So I looked at it and it read more, narrative and text-based than the Douglas master plan was graphical and visual and more like a slideshow presentation with highlights. So is this intended to be the backbone that will feed into that style of presentation, or?
Yeah, exactly. This is going to be your block of text to get through really every little fine detail, and then we'll make it easier for everyone to read.
Okay.
But you guys don't get the fun part yet.
No, I get it. That's actually the hard part, to do the graphics and the, make it pretty and find photos and all that other stuff. So, okay, good.
Real quick, just to follow up on that, Grace and I did have a few conversations on that exact question. We definitely want this to be a very user friendly, graphic friendly document. And if we could say, something within a picture or a graphic or a table, that's what we want to do rather than have all the text. But we thought, at least for this first review draft, we'll probably be a little bit heavier on the narratives and the wording. And as we refine the plan, it will be narrowed down and a bit more concise. And then we even thought about some opportunities for background reports or some of this data that could be moved to an associated report or an appendix to really try to shorten up the plan. So all of that's in mind. We'd like this to be something that somebody can pick up and read in one sitting rather than over a couple of weeks. So that's something that we'll be brainstorming over the next couple of weeks as well.
I actually thought it was very readable. It does take a while, but I thought, yeah, anyway.
It will end up being in a InDesign format or something different. So these first drafts will just be raw text in a quasi formatted Word document, but it will be pretty in your second draft of these chapters.
Right. Hey, David, question was you or Grayson, in our kits, it started, the actual plan, the chapters 1 through 3 start on page 31. But then we also had, the pages 14 through 30, which was a lot of it was these similar, because we have those the city charts where you're doing the neighborhood characteristics, the central downtown activity center. Did you want us to kind of, I guess, I know you had questions stuff before that. Like, did you want us to kind of comment on those
Yeah,
here
I
or
thought we
during the
could kind of go
chapters?
through that in this planning areas section of the workbook here. And I just put those in there so you guys kind of have like quick reference to them
Okay,
for conversation.
because
but-
again, I know that they're in the chapter 3 part
Yep.
of the comprehensive plan. And so I thought we could either discuss it then or we can put them in this order that they are in our kit. And I didn't know what your thoughts were.
Can I make a keeping question or
Sure.
under traditional neighborhood residential? I keep looking at the map and I don't see, I thought it was gonna be outlined in black, or is that the purple? Because every other one you have, the key is what color, for example, city central is yellow. And then you have neighborhood traditional residential and it looks black, but that's that's the section off of On Street up by the river. So did that need to be purple? Or did you need to outline more in black? Or David, do you know what I'm talking about, or Grayson? Yeah.
Is it
It's talking about page 23,
23 or.
because it looks purple,
Yeah,
but I think it's
23.
supposed to be black.
And there's no outline to
Yeah.
it.
It is the blocks are I see your point. It is that central area. And I think if you take the other colors and look in the middle of those, that's what it is. But to your point, Grayson's already digitized all my initial sketches. So in the next drafts, you'll have we thought maybe just one character map that would be one display exhibit that we could then refer to rather than having 10 or 15 of these sub maps. So we will have one clear digitized map that will be easier to read.
It's a line point. And if I may, at this point, one other kind of 10,000 foot comment. From my perspective, the importance of Saugatuck for the LGBTQ community and the importance of the LGBT community in Saugatuck needs to be emphasized more. Just for reference, there was a gay bar at the Big Civilian, for example, so that's more than 1950. The yin and yang of art and LGBTQ and LGBTQ and art. I think it just needs to be emphasized more and maybe talk to Larry Gammons, who was an owner of the Douglas Dunes. talked to people at the Historical Society who have extensive LGBTQ firsthand accounts and information on the history in this town. And it is, you know, people come, you talk to people and they may be staying at the Dover Dunes, but they know to come to Saugatuck, just like Key West or Palm Springs or Provincetown or Rehoboth Beach. Saugatuck is the LGBTQ vacation center for the entire Midwest. And it is one of, I would say, only 5 or so in the entire nation. So that is, I think, needs to be made more prominent, in my opinion.
And I'm going to agree. Because that's actually when we get into the chapter 1 of the plan. So I was trying to like finish if we were to talk about the neighborhood segmentation. If anybody had any comments on these before we move into the actual plan itself. So I would talk about the pages 14 through 30. And the only one that I kind of was noticing, Dave, and I was open to see what everybody else thinks, was on the South Riverfront Residential, which is page 25. We talk about buildings, single family dwellings and multi-attached, but really one of the largest landowners and then in that section is the Old Pike, which is a motor court. And so I didn't know if we would also want to kind of toss in that we, you know, it's single family dwellings and multi-unit, but that's a fairly large operation that they have with the Old Pike. So it's,
There's at least 3 on that side of bed and breakfast type place. There's the
Right.
Vacasa, then there's the Saugatuck Bay Inn. So there's a couple.
so that was, I just thought that if we're kind of highlighting, it really is more mixed use than what we were making it sound like it's all residential.
The land use out of the transitional residential sort of, which is the other side of the lake. I thought the land use of there sort of fits that side as well. It's not, we're not throwing businesses, but we're throwing bed and breakfast accommodation, inns and motor courts on that side. If you're going to keep them separate, then I thought it needed a little different land use as well.
But most of the other ones, as far as when I looked at what the building types were, the land use, the scales, you know, the streetscapes, seemed to me was, you know, very accurate. And then I think it was that one. And also I was curious, is there no parking on Allegan all the way over to Maple?
No, I think you can park on that.
I thought on, I thought one side, because there was, that was on the South Hillside Residential, page 27. It said no on-street parking except for 19 spaces along State Street. And I thought there was parking allowed along one section of Allegan.
I'm not sure if I went through the street, but I believe there are parts of it that maybe is.
And again, these are minor, but as, not at all.
Both sides?
I believe that I cannot picture
I couldn't
any
remember.
parking on Allegan from Lake Street all the way to
Yeah, I can't either.
Maple.
Okay. Yeah, I just had a question, so that's good.
We were relying on the parking inventory from the parking report. So we did look at
That's
that
great.
mapping, but we can go back and confirm that as well.
Okay.
Typo on North Marina Harbor Service Area. It's, you got Lake Street where you meant Holland. The other comment that I noted is I liked that the walkability, you made some comments about the sidewalks in the first couple and you mentioned fragmented in the second one. I was like, well, that area is pretty well covered in sidewalks. Let me find where my note is. Downtown waterfront commercial. Yeah, fragmented sidewalks. And I was like, I'm thinking that's got pretty good. They're just across from Morrow's, that place right there. There's not a sidewalk there, but other than that, I thought it was pretty consistent. Then you sort of lost that pattern. The walkabilities of all the items after that lost that sidewalk portion. You mentioned it up in the streetscape section, but I thought it was nice down in that bottom one. So we talk about our goals of sidewalks. I mentioned, my notes say Lucy, because Lucy struggles for sidewalks.
And I'm sorry.
I'm done.
And Dave, you need to update parking in our residential areas, there's parking on only one side of the street. That was passed by the city council, what, how many years ago?
3 years ago, 3.
So you have it listed as, on street, on both sides of the streets. You'll find driving around town, they're on one side of the street, both traditional, on the hill and otherwise. In the residential areas.
So the traditional neighborhood residential needs to have one side of the street parking versus both sides, right?
Believe also it's Central City, I think, one side of the street also, those rest down.
Butler between Lucy and Francis, but it's only at certain times of the year. I think of any other streets that are downtown city center that are only one side of the street, I think that's it.
Oh, okay. All right, so yes, it would be just on the hill. I couldn't remember exactly the limited, the,
Portions of Griffith, actually Griffith up by the church,
Mhm.
outside, and
you know,
Right, there's on one side.
yeah,
yeah.
traditional neighborhood residential.
And then to the sidewalk point, on the west riverfront residential, which includes that whole Park Street. You know, we talk about it's limited primarily along Park Street on a limited shoulder walkable to the ferry. But I know that's been one of the big issues about wanting to have sidewalks potentially put in even for the safety of people along that section. So I really think that the west riverfront residential needs to kind of address the fact that, you know, yeah, we got limited shoulder, walkability, but there is no sidewalks, because I think that would be something that we're probably going to have as a future goal, is to continue to address the feasibility of doing that.
And I agree with that, Chairman Mans. I think part of this, part of the discussion should include some vision regarding, Douglas has a sidewalk that goes up to the top of Ferry Street. And then it stops, and then they have a little, actually, when they replace the culvert, they've got a little walkway there, and then there's no walkway up until camp, there's no walkway after
Right.
that. But I think at some point, you got Wusa, and you've got the Rookie Barrel, of course, you've got, Barking Dog Italian Ice, and got a lot of people walking in through that area, and
time.
that would be a natural place for us to work with our, work with Douglas to say, hey, could we continue your path, already coming down from the top of the hill down through and carry us through?
Right.
Because that would encourage people, a lot of people use a path that's on Center Street, that's.
That was a big improvement, yes, yeah.
That's heavily used, so.
It's heavily used, and I think what's there along Ferry Street was primarily because the West Shore development, they worked it into where they had to put in the sidewalk, so kind of where that development ends, there's nothing, and then they put the really nice wide, sidewalk when they put the bridge back in, but now it just needs to be connected on their side, but also, and somebody, at least as far as we're talking about these areas, I would just kind of want to see that we highlight that there's no sidewalks in that west riverfront.
And I think I 100% support accessibility and transportability through these communities without getting out, without getting into your car. But I think we should also be careful that we don't always assume that's a sidewalk. We have an interurban path that goes between North Street and goes down to the Margaret or Northern Peterson Reserve, which people walk, and there's bikes out there usually, and you'll see a lot of folks using that, and they know that it's there, it's not marked well, so people may not know about it. But the point is that it's not a sidewalk, but yet it's being used as a way to get one from one point A to point B. So I think Park Street's a great example of everybody envisions a paved sidewalk. It doesn't necessarily have to be a paved sidewalk. Now, it could be a hard pack, so I think about the Calhaven Trail or different paths like that, which are much more natural. So I think we need to be careful when we just assume it's a sidewalk.
That's
It
true.
doesn't have to be a sidewalk.
Just some way that you actually have an area where you're not walking in traffic.
Right, exactly. Word of caution.
That's actually might be a little more feasible with some of the people who live along there too.
I've had this suggested by several people that go on Park Street, there's a different way to look at this, so.
Interesting. Thank you. Any other things before we move into the comprehensive plan
No, I
regarding?
thought these areas were well defined, and I agree with the different comments that were made as well, but no, these captured what I think are the unique spots in town.
Great.
So
And then after we talk about the comprehensive plan, Grayson, we want to have us go through it. Or you want to do the questions and then go into the plan? Because I kind of read all the material, then I went back and actually did your page of the questions. because it was hard for me to try to answer the questions without reading the chapters.
Yeah, we can definitely go into the plan first.
Can I say one thing? So
Absolutely.
move on. Just trying to notice what that now, with what's going on now on Mason Street with the old church by the American Legion. Does that still make sense to have that little two building cut out there as part of the transitional residential? Between that and the American Legion? I don't know, that was something that we discussed before, and I know especially when that place was for sale, because it was limited in what it could be.
As far as
One of those ones that doesn't really look like the other when you look at its surroundings. And I would-
Page 18.
Yeah, sorry, it's on page 21.
Oh, page 21.
On residential. The top right box right there, you'll see how Mason Street's kind of split down the middle on the left side.
Yeah, that's a better one.
The Saugatuck Drug and then the American Legion and the church, which is now going to be a bed and breakfast, which, and I think they have future plans to try and do more, but of course they are limited with what they can do.
No, it's a good point because actually I skipped over that one. I've got this whole thing where it says, is that really more of a mixed? Because we have several bed and breakfasts currently and one coming.
Yeah. Because you even look at the bed and breakfast across the street, which is Twin Oaks. They are just a separate zone, and then there's another bed and breakfast. Is that still a bed and breakfast right down the corner? It makes it, yeah, it's funky. But I do understand the east side of Mason Street on the other side of Griffith, that should be transitional, because that makes sense on
Mhm.
Lower Mason. But on the west side, I just don't know what's talking about anymore.
Good point. There's two residences on Griffith between Hoffman and Mason. There's two homes still.
So it's,
Yeah, and then Betty Jo and another one, but the other.
okay.
So, yeah, and I don't know if we maybe if that is. If we still keep that, or if you incorporate it into purple, then that, I mean, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, and purple is, sorry, is the downtown neighborhood mixed use, and so maybe it makes sense to.
Let's go back there, but that is an interesting one, because you have the two little spots in the city, in my opinion, then you got the big Lake Street run. And then you have this South Lake that we have is different, but the rules are sort of, or what's being used is sort of the same. So I agree with what you said, that those orange spots in the middle sort of match some of the transitionals, what we have in the city. And the Lake Street part more matches what we have on the water part. With bed and breakfast, motor courts. So the land use of the transitional residential, I thought fit that area pretty good.
Downtown neighborhood mixed use. I think it could almost fall into either one. It's probably more of a downtown neighborhood mixed use than what it is transitional residential, but they kind of have the same feel. When I think of transitional residential, I think it's more residential with some, and then when I think of downtown neighborhood mixed use, it's more leaning towards commercial with there's a fewer residential. They're almost kind of the same in some, in my mind.
Well, I almost suggest it, though, at least that segment shifting to the central downtown activity center. Red.
Red.
Yeah.
Oh, to the
Not
red.
purple. I guess I don't, yeah, so I guess I just don't know why we have American Legion and a former church as part of that, on the same block.
That makes sense.
Sorry, I wasn't clear enough there,
No,
but
no, well, yeah, except the definition of transitional does include bed and breakfast, so.
it doesn't feel better, I think, but again, if it. I think that it was.
Where red doesn't.
Whereas currently our red exactly doesn't allow for bed. What do you put our current zones?
Right, sure.
Right.
But I know that at least when it's for sale, I felt that it's just personal feelings that it was a missed opportunity because that spot was going to, it could have been a cool business as we have seen a lot of churches repurposed as such, but now we're could only do one thing. And I know that they're keeping options open for basement, so I don't know what they're planning on doing, but it's just one area where North is trying to figure out why we had those probably there, especially with the American Legion building too. So I don't know what is a future of that. As a
Mhm.
member of it.
And since we're on page 21, that map also, between Mason and Hoffman on Griffith on the east side is all bed and breakfast. I mean, there is
Pretty
no,
much.
there is no residential. So that's an error. I would say that's an error. That should all be orange or,
That purple? I think it's purple.
Should probably more the purple, which is the downtown neighborhood mixed use.
Yeah, makes sense.
some color other than black.
Yep.
It's not residential.
Right, it's Twin Oaks and then the other one next to it.
Right. Yeah, so either goes into the red or goes into the purple. Really, both of those orange sections. Along Mason and Griffith.
I think the character of the rest of Mason fits the transition that we have in other places going into the Sierra Farm, that's the, that makes sense.
Right.
It's just that.
The rest of it is right. It's just that corner. Yeah, those four.
Speaking for myself.
Makes sense.
So would you, as a consensus, move it to downtown neighborhood mixed use? Or move it, or that is the purple, so it
Versus red.
versus the red.
Let's see.
Downtown business use allows commercial.
Right.
Yeah, personally, I think it's.
Right.
Then, just, okay.
And this is more of how do we look at it? What's the character now? It's not necessarily what we want it to be or what it could be, but what is the character now in terms of the building scale and placement and I think there's a distinction between the red and purple in terms of the down the red area is going to really be the street wall type buildings up to the road, more of a
Right.
formal main street versus the purple area is going to be more different scales, different variations of buildings backed up from the road a little bit, but certainly a lot of commercial in that area. So
It probably fits better in the downtown neighborhood if you think about it. If we're talking about most of the red is that lot line type of building.
yes.
So it would just be a matter of continuing it down as part of the purple.
Okay, so that's so both sides of Griffith, just north of Mason.
Yeah, the orange one, it goes along Mason, along Griffith, and then those 5 lots on Mason that are east of Griffith. So those 2 orange squares
Got it. Yep.
would move over to the purple.
And then if you're looking at Griffith, Dave, between Mason and Hoffman, the east side, those 2 lots either extend the orange or make that purple all the way up to Hoffman, because
That's true.
that jog out, that first lot, that's the bed and breakfast.
Okay.
Yeah, right where your cursor was. She was on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to.
Okay, that's
So
helpful.
so the purple would just kind of go down.
Make a draft, and if we agree it's not right, we'll tell you next month.
We'll take
Perfect.
full blame and give you good direction.
Right.
We'll be excited to see what, how you interpret it.
The 2
But I
boxes,
like your point, I'm sorry, I like your point about red versus purple. I agree with that.
the 2 orange boxes at Spear Street, are those are still, because the definition I think fits that area, but we're now getting pretty geographically far apart between the 2 big orange blocks now. Well, you got the 2 that split Spear, and then you have all of Culver Lake Street, which I'd say those are fairly different characteristics, but they're used sort of the same.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of looked at it. Was that it was just taking different parts
They're
of the
just
city to
different-
have
yeah.
very similar type of
Yeah.
use, similar
Okay.
type of look.
And I guess I'm more looking at this as how we're, at least with those ones, it's full blocks, whereas if this other one was splitting a block, I don't see
Yeah.
a point. Based on the use as in, like American Legion is exclusively pretty much a rental hall.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for that, south through the lakeside, we were just changing, adding a land use of inns, bed and breakfast and motor courts. Is that what the,
Correct.
okay.
Just expanding it out, so it's not just saying primarily residential.
Just changing the land use. Okay.
And so that's page 25, South Riverfront Residential.
Yes, yeah, right now where it says primarily residential, just making it more.
Got it.
That we actually do have motor courts and bed and breakfasts in there too. And a property management business, so it's kind of got even a matter of commercial.
Okay.
Moving on to the working draft for the comprehensive master plan. I think Mark kind of kicked it off with a very good comment that was interesting. Maybe it's because we have similar background, but I thought that, I mean, the art and culture legacy on page 12. It's nice that we kind of make the reference, to the being the Art Coast of Michigan, and we talk about the LGBTQ plus. But I did think that it probably needed to be expanded out somewhat about the importance of that. I mean, we do have I don't know what the exact percentage, of the population, but it's definitely higher than any of the neighboring communities or in the city. And I even put in my comment was, that we do have the largest gay and lesbian resort in the Midwest, is within our tri-community. It's not in our city, but it is in Douglas. And so again, you can kind of go back and make reference to what Mark was talking about.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great point too. And I'd almost want to push, that in just, understanding the people of Saugatuck. I almost feel like that should be prioritized as really the first section of chapter 2, rather than talking about early history, maritime heritage, maybe just focus on the people and the culture, right off the bat in chapter 2.
And again, you're not, playing it up, more than what it needs to be, but it is something that we are known for.
I was thinking, my thinking was, rather than giving it a single mention, as you were going through various paragraphs, there may be appropriate times to throw it in as a reference, rather than a one-off.
We'll just kind of go through, if anybody's got comments on things leading up to page 42 or page 12 of the draft. Otherwise, I was just planning on going like pages and letting people.
I have a comment on page 41, if I may. I don't know this is anecdotal to me, but I think there was also a period when all the forests were taken down that a fruit, a garden type of society grew up. Heck, we had a pie factory. So I think it's more than, I think there was other transition from shipbuilding or shipping and fur trading to all of a sudden we were a resort. I think there were other things going on, and I think one of them was agriculture. So as I seem to recall.
And on that same page, I was just wondering, do we need to make a reference to the little city of Singapore? We've got the sign right out here in front of the city hall that talks about the history of Singapore. And after they did remove all of the forestry, then basically the city sunk. And then they kind of moved a few of the buildings into Saugatuck. I think that's a great story that's out there. So I would, if I'm talking about kind of our history and evolution, I think that's an interesting one to kind of bring into it.
Yeah, essentially what happened is that the white pine, which was indigenous to the state of Michigan, was completely wiped out for construction and built the city of Chicago before the Chicago fire.
Right.
And as a result of taking down all the trees, that's when the sand dunes started to take Singapore over. And they didn't have any way to hold back, so they just took what they could, moved the river, brought it here to the flats, which is what it was known at the time. And so some of those buildings still remain here. So I think that it's important to note that.
I do.
because, even though it was a great place for the natives and the indigenous folks to be, white settlers were looking at the industry. So where I'm going with this is that there was a fruit exchange building, which is now where the Coffin Park is, that was a fruit exchange building. Mysteriously fell down one night. It was the Boston headquarters for Harris Pie and for Rich Products back in the day.
Sure.
But where I'm going with this is that Douglas had the basket factory. So a lot of the fruit growing was done over in the Fenville area and points east of here and south of here.
right.
Pure was also in the situation if the fruit was brought here
That's right.
to be exchanged at fruit exchange or to be put in baskets, et cetera, to bring it here, but then it would be brought on boats and taken out of here to go to other point. So it's been an industrial, it was a commerce center.
Okay.
Shipbuilding was part of that, but then the actual transition from that to the agriculture, as Commissioner Lachey said, that was an important part of this community too. A lot of people work in that industry.
So I guess my view on this, so you don't have to do a super detailed history for the master plan. Douglas didn't, but if we're going to do it, I would add all those things. I would actually add even more of the history that talks about how we got to where we are now over the last, 30, 40 years and how things have changed and iconic structures that are gone and, how the way of life might have been. Again, it gives the context for what we're going to talk about for where we want things to go. So again, you don't have to do a 4-page, 5-page history, but we do have an interesting history. So
No, I think you can add it in briefly, but also I like the idea when you're thinking about when you're going to have photos in that, if you have some old photos of some things used to be.
Right.
Because when we're talking about our future and our goals, since everybody has like the whole preservation as being so high, and wanting to maintain some of that character, then that becomes part of like, people can understand the charm that, has been there and even maybe some of us that's been lost.
Mhm.
And this is why you want to try to maintain, what you have. So
Is there a strong consensus that you guys do want to keep in a history section though? Or do you guys want to nix it? The track community plan doesn't have one in, as you mentioned, Douglas.
Douglas is very brief. I
actually kind
I
of
like it. I just think we just need to be careful that we're not totally overdoing it. And it's easy to throw everything in and let it sit there and then it's a lot. So, but the history is interesting enough that I think it's a good read in the master plan. in my opinion.
If this expanded out by 4 or 5 paragraphs, you could hit a lot and you still could, when it's printed, it would only be like maybe 4 pages of history with photos.
With photos, yeah.
But, and I agree with Commissioner Baldwin, I don't think we need, the history of soccer is told in many different places in this
Yeah.
community. I think what's important is kind of that transition that I was talking about, is that one of the core values of the community has always been its industry, industrial. In different ways, and today the industry is a resort, but the tourism industry. So as the community continues and everything that was here, the housing stock, the businesses downtown at one time were here solely to support the people that live in town and work in town. So now the businesses are to support much less of that, but more to support people that come to visit. So I think if we, that's right from a planning standpoint, I think that's important to say, that's changed, but yet it's still part of the character of the community, right?
And honestly, I think that distinguishes it from Douglas and and especially the township is. We are history. I mean, that's what, people walk around and are marvel at. Different buildings,
Right.
different homes. I think it would be best, I'm not saying turn this into a history lesson, but I think it is a vital part of who we are is as much as. Who our people are.
And I think, the write-up that we have started on page 42, where we get into the resort community development, like right there at that last paragraph, I think is perfect, where it says over time, the community developed an intentional approach to historic preservation. It's like, hey, we kind of transition to being more of a resort versus, we got to kind of highlight that we don't have the same type of industry. But right there, you're introducing, the importance of historical preservation. So. The next page is on community engagement. I think it's pretty straightforward. When did you have the stakeholder interviews?
Well, Russ actually recommended one of the walking group leaders, so I went and just did very informal interviews
Fantastic.
with them after they finished one of their walks, so I wanted to include that for you guys. But I think that this would be a great place for you guys to mention any public engagement that you want to do so that we can make sure that we set that up and kind of get that going.
I think the public, I love that you talked to the walking review. But I think our public hearings are going to, the one we had already. Which was, I thought, nicely attended, and then the others that we're gonna have, I think that's. This is an engaged community, I think. My nice way of saying people have a lot of time on their hands. I think, public hearings and that that we have anticipated will be fine.
This is probably an area where I would have more of the highlights on the master plan and an attachment that has more of the details about, you know, your interviews with the walking club and things like that. I mean, just it presented well in the Douglas plan when they did that, you know, the takeaways, but
One thing that I think we'll try to include in this too, is in the fall, we're planning to do like a town hall for business owners and kind of trying to incorporate
next
that
step, I'm sorry.
conversation
Sure.
into it.
great.
Because that's one of the things that I felt, we've had a lot of, you know, residents and even the walking group, but if we could actually get a, you know, little focus group of some of the business owners so they can kind of let us know what their thoughts are, because it varies dramatically when I talk to people. One of the things that in that walking group that you highlighted, they talked about the particular attention for the Holland and Blue Star. I hear that one, but I hear Lake Street and Blue Star almost as often as I hear Holland and Blue Star. So I didn't know, I mean, they didn't bring it up to you, but I kind of put in there, I was like, hey, I'm talking about one place where we got, they want us to pay attention. I thought we had both. Plus the Lake and Blue Star is actually in our demographic, or not demographic, but.
Right, maybe it's nitpicky, but Holland and Blue Star is in our city.
No, it's township,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I included that just so you guys are aware of what their concerns were, but in the end, like when this gets cleaned up, that'll get taken out because it's.
We'll
not-
take that out. We'll put it in Lake and Blue Star.
Yeah.
The, who our people are, I found some of this stuff very interesting. And I think people who are reading, you know, they take time to read a master plan. When you look at the population, you know, as Russ had already kind of highlighted, we're less than, 800, now in the city. But then you look at the growth within Douglas and Sagatuck Township, and then we talk about what that would look like over the next 5 years and how it will probably continue to grow at 30 to 50% in each of those areas. That 89% growth in the township was, I knew it had grown. I didn't realize it was that much. Let's discuss.
As we go forward, think about race and ethnicity, I wonder if as we think about the master plan, whether we want to do something to promote diversity. I mean, we have, and I know who he is, we have one Native American in town. 97% of our population is white. Now, do we want to, as part of a master plan, which is to, where do we want to be in 10 years? Do we want to be more racially, ethnically diverse? Do we want to continue to promote LGBTQ housing, living people, or is that not appropriate for a master plan? And even if it is, but I mean, even if it theoretically is that something I'm not saying we decide right at this moment, but to have a city that's 97% white, there's an ugly history that's not in here about Sagatuck and minorities. And I'm not saying we insert that, but I think the result is that Sagatuck is 97% white.
Yeah. David, we were talking about the declining population, I was just wondering, could we possibly put in what we think is some of the reasons, for the decline? I think part of it, is you have with an aging population, you have what kids that used to be in the household have grown up themselves and have possibly moved. You have, affordability factors in to, who can afford to buy it. I also thought that some families have moved because they needed bigger space, and instead of like building, tearing down or expanding or building new, they just decided to move to a larger home. And then obviously second ownerships, affected because from a census standpoint, you can only be counted wherever your primary is. So the more second home ownerships that we have to where they're not homestead, then they can't be counted into our population, but yet they're here during the seasonal time periods. So those were things that I was thinking might help explain why you've had a declining population.
So I used that to answer one of your questions up above. The population was surprised me. It shows 35 or the additional houses that the owner lives in, from 2020 to 2024, but the population went down by over 100. I was surprised by that. So that did surprise me.
And I think right now, David, on page 49 of our kit, 19 on the write-up, you do make reference that there's like additional 1,091 additional residents during the summer months. So we're touching on it in a different area, but when we're actually showing that chart on the population decline, and we say it's a lot like a lot of other Michigan cities, I think ours is different. A lot of other Michigan cities have a population decline because they've lost industry. I think a big part of our population decline is the aging. It's the things that we were just talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea to put some observations and a little bit of analysis into why we see that as occurring. So I think that makes good sense, just to put a little bit more narrative to the data that we're presenting.
Just since we're on this page, one thing that jumped out to me was the fact that the number of housing units went from 945 to 910 in the last 4 years. So how did we lose 35 housing units in 4 years? And maybe that's the census data and they're whatever, right? It's not validated by us, but that surprised me.
On page 50, the Allen County total households and total families.
That one's wrong. I definitely that was my next, as soon as we got to that page, I've got that one circled as.
Which one now?
On page 50 where they have the Allegan County, 127,544,000 something. I was like, we do not have 127 million households, and we don't have total families of 82 million. So I'm not certain. We got to check those two. I think the percentages and average,
Everything else.
size might be right, but
I think Dave was
somehow-
checking if we're paying attention. So.
exactly.
Just want to make sure you read this far.
Aren't you impressed that we're picking up on some of these things? You thought we were just going to come in here and be like, oh yeah, I reviewed it.
It's great.
Something that shocked me, page 21 of the report, page 51 of ours. 31% of children under the age of 18 in our community are under the poverty level. Where did you get that?
I know.
That actually was census data.
31% of the children in our community are.
Yeah,
under
which is,
poverty.
I thought it was really interesting too, and I wanted to look more into it because Mill Pond actually just put out the average sale of homes from this past year, 2025, and now, and it was well into $800,000 for an average home. So I think there might be some discrepancy there. Yeah.
Ridgeview Oaks.
Yeah.
And probably those apartments.
In there, I'm surprised there was a lot of kids.
Okay.
A lot of kids there.
I know our school system has, 50-some% or I forget what Kristen at SCA said, 70-some percent do the free lunch program, free breakfast, free lunch, but I'm sorry, it's not, it just shocked me. Does that make sense?
Especially when you look at our school of choice, though 50% too.
Absolutely, that's why.
And they're
That's why
coming
that
in
did
from.
surprise me, although 31%.
And then you have the disclaimer of the 10% margin of error. So
Right.
it's like,
Right, so, but even 20-some% of our kids in town when you've got housing stock that's $800,000 per house, it is surprised, it
Yeah.
shocked me in a real negative way.
I circled
that
one as well.
And I think, and I know this is just data that came from the census, Grayson, but the per capita income, that's just of the residents, right? That's not looking at the income of, again, I'm thinking of all the second families who are not homestead. Because that,
That's a good question. Grayson, when you are giving numbers, it is for however you want to call it, Saugatuck residents, not part-time people who count this as their full-time residents. Whether it's 766 who live here or whatever, that's,
For the population, and household composition, that is gonna be for the residents, full-time. I'm not sure, Dave, I think you might have done the, section
Yeah.
that talks about per capita income.
Yeah, that's from the 2024 American Community Survey. So that's of residents who are reporting in the city.
okay.
okay,
So
I mean-
not census, but a different survey.
all right. Because I kind of, like I said, well, part of it I can understand because you do have an older population, so they would have, but that to me meant they'd probably have more wealth, but I was surprised that the income, since it is such a much older population, was higher.
And then just so you guys know, the ACS survey that he's talking about is actually from the census
Okay.
website. It's just a more frequent survey, which
Okay.
is why the margin of error sometimes is higher than. Yeah.
And remind me median versus, I know what per capita is, but median is, if there's a bell curve, it's in the middle, or is it it's not average? What's median?
Half are above and half are below.
Thanks. So it's top of the bell curve.
Yeah.
Great.
Back to Craig's question, and I had the same one. The 35 houses that we lost is that data that we have? I just don't know that I've seen 35 houses disappear.
I'm curious if they are counting that as houses that have been torn down and rebuilt. I was gonna go through our building permits that we have, and
That's
check
still
it
quite
with
a few.
MTS.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we're actually adding here and there a few, right?
Yeah, that was.
Because I was,
Seven, whatever it's called.
because I don't know where you lost it, and then.
Couple in Dune grass.
Right, there's at least 5 in Dune grass that was built in the last, probably 7.
Right, most of the ones that come down are rebuilt at least, so.
And in between, there's probably
Yeah.
where it would be counted lost, but still 35 seemed like a big number. Seemed like a big number.
I mean, I know of one that was torn down and not built, so, but not 35.
Right.
I mean, I think if we drove around town, we'd go, oh, there was a house there, and now it's an empty lot.
If there were 35 open lots, there'd be people building on
There's one.
Exactly.
them.
Well, there's one on our streets, AJ's grandmother's house, so
Yeah.
that's torn down, it's gone, but.
Correct, there's a
They
few.
provided.
But it is a beautiful park now.
Yes.
No, they do not.
Yeah.
We call it a park, but it's only for Manchester. On the next page, when we got into housing stock, which is page 52 in our kit 22, one, I think it, like we're just talking about, we really do have almost a fully developed, we don't have a whole lot of undeveloped lots. So I think we can kind of highlight that. And I was just curious, when we talk about the median homes, the pricing going from 355 to 650, are we able to get an average price per square foot or an average of what the actual size of the homes are? And I don't know if that even matters, but sometimes I just wonder, like, is the average size of a home in Saugatuck the same or smaller than our surrounding communities? Is that data? I have to go back to Douglas's plan to see if they have that in there or not.
Yeah, we can take a look. I know there's, some market data we're able to get access to. Most of this is just census and an ACS data. So we can dig a little bit deeper. There's some other, blanks here as well, like some of the economy, business employment data that was not available for the city. So we have some gaps to fill with the data.
Okay. Moving on to the charts on page 53. I'm sorry.
Want to make one,
Absolutely.
for that, just to bring to the attention of everybody, it's the renter occupied housing units. And just the drastic fall off we've had from there, from 2010 it was 133, and then 2024 was 67, but the even more alarming is in 2020 is 125. And that 4-year span it got cut. And I think especially in other parts of this plan, when we talk about get around residents, affordability, who do we think are living in those regular housing needs? And that is a lot of people who are staffing this town and
Yep.
stuff. Absolutely. So I just want to make a note of that because that's huge draw. Especially when you look at just the limited supply that we have. And I'm sure a lot of those probably became
Short-term rentals, right, that's what I had.
We had 22 owner occupied, so we did bring in 22 families in at that same time frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a good point, because we hear about it all the times that a lot of people that work in this town have to drive 20-25 miles and gas, cost of gas goes up, et cetera. That limits their talent pool to be able to bring people into town. They're always trying to find people. So from a long-term standpoint, I don't know how you would get more properties in town for people to live in. There's been a few ideas over the years. There was a boarding house that was actually put up illegally up on St. Joseph Street for a few years. And so that had people living in it. There's been other attempts to, we used to board people down at Coral Gables back in the day. So, but anyway, the point being is that I think from a business and economic vitality standpoint, I think that's something to think about too. We're not gonna be building homes for these people, but how can we encourage or develop from a planning standpoint, opportunities for people to the point that Austin just made?
Correct.
There are people here in town that actually solely rent to long-term people that want to live, work in town.
Yeah, you have the lockers, and I mean, Councilman Muncy is now stepping down, like, if we wouldn't be able to serve on council, they've made that available, and the same thing with the drugstore. They have lockers.
Some other friends.
So how do you incentivize that behavior is, right now, what will it take for you to rent to?
Long-term, right.
Yeah.
And it's not only the people driving and all of that, but if you want more restaurants, we were at a restaurant Sunday and they shut early and it's all staffing. They just don't have people to. It's an hour and a half wait because maybe not because the kitchen's big enough, but they just don't have the wait staff to wash the dishes and get the food out to the tables and this, that, and the other. So it is, yeah. And I'll tell you, a lot of people say, I'm not driving 20 miles. I'm not gonna be a student at Grand Valley when I can work a mile from my dorm and instead of driving 20 miles to go to Saugatuck. So,
And especially when you see statewide, some of the regions that grew the most for Grand Rapids and even Holland, it's Holland faster than cities, so. We've been able to easily grab some of those workers in Holland, but as that city grows and they can make more money there. What is going to bring Angelica and come look in this community, and it's not just restaurant industry, it's everything.
Right.
How do you, they contribute in more ways than just working too.
So as we look at this, a very good point, that's another thing we wanna promote the policy of affordable housing in this community somehow. I'm not sure how that takes yet, but those are things we have to think about in terms of where we're gonna be in 10 years.
Anything else on the charts that are on page 53? 54. We talk about although 493 housing units were classified as vacant. Is vacant because they're non-homestead, which means they're like second homes? I mean, we don't have
That's what I assume.
493 homes that are sitting vacant. So I'm assuming that meant that they were non-homestead, which I thought that was a very high number. It means like over 50% of our homes are not homestead where they're primary residents. So I was just questioning that number. We can verify it. Underneath short-term rental on page 55, we do have and there's the paragraph where it talks about the R1 districts have exceeded their cap. We talk about Peninsula West District has exceeded it by 3 licenses, but then the very next page shows that we've exceeded by 4 licenses. This is minor, but
There's one that's an ADU. So I can switch that, or make a note of it, but that technically, that one doesn't count towards the cap.
It also says that Peninsula West is the only other R1 district that has exceeded its cap at Maple Street has too.
I think actually that's gonna be two ADUs as well.
Okay.
I'll double check that though, but
Oh, yeah, I missed that. Good catch, Greg.
and I'll put a little,
This is a
yeah. I'll
video
put
in
something
there.
in there.
Yeah, okay. So on that chapter, other comments before we go on to the community character, which is chapter 3? So we're kind of kicking off this one with those goals. And who wrote chapter 3?
Yes, and I wanted to mention that too. Chapter 3 is going to be really the first almost planning topic area type chapter. So it's structured in a way where it's going to be the first chapter that has a goal that's specific to the chapter itself. So we just like these first 6 option goals. Our intent is just to have one overarching goal for the chapter, and so this is just Grace and I actually we just put this into AI and just said read this chapter and give us some goals. So that was kind of just a way to just say, hey, here's all the information. Let's somehow synthesize it into one overarching goal. And we just came up with a couple options just for discussion purposes. So, we may come up with something that's kind of a combination of several of these options, but the idea is for the next several chapters to have an introduction and a goal right at the beginning of the chapter. And then aside in this chapter, obviously we have the lengthy character analysis, but then we get into the specific topic areas of community character. And so each one of those topic areas would be addressed. And then the chapter concludes with a list of planning principles. And then so there would be one planning principle corresponding to each topic area. So that's was our idea, how to generally structure the next few chapters, having a goal, all the topic area discussions, which really are going to be identifying what's important, helping us to determine a needs assessment, looking for opportunities, what are the concerns. And then we also really wanted to tie these topic areas into public comment. So you'll notice in the topic area paragraphs, we're bringing in some of the statistics from the community survey and just things that we heard. We wanted to really tie into these sections as well. And then so at the end we have our principles that tie in each topic area, and then those will then help us to come up with a list of recommendations or action items that would then be summarized in the last chapter of the plan. So I want to give kind of an overview of what these chapters, how they're structured and what they're going to look like moving forward.
Did you say that the introduction and goal section was AI generated?
Yeah, actually, just for the sake of just a kind of an exercise, what I did is I just dumped this entire chapter 3 into ChatGPT and just said, come up with potential goals. So, I mean, it's not something that we would typically do, but just as kind of to show how the highlights of the chapter would kind of translate into a goal. So it's really just for discussion purpose and just to think about how we could put together a goal. But ultimately, I think the Planning Commission, an exercise that you guys could go through is to really help to formalize that strong initial overarching goal to each chapter. And so, these options are just kind of food for thought for the development of that one overarching goal.
Well, it's good to know that they were like options, because when I read all 6 of them, I said, they all sound somewhat similar, but now I understand why.
I did like the last one myself as my favorite, but they're all very similar.
You've got a green sticker. Touch.
Yeah, we did.
It may be what we could do is for future chapters as well. Grayson's great at putting together the kind of the introduction memos and the exercises, and maybe we could come up with some sort of a goal setting exercise for each chapter moving forward. And maybe it's a survey or a worksheet or something like that, and just to help us to get whether it's your reading of this or our summary through the technology to come up with the highlights, and then we put it all together into one perfect goal for the chapter. So,
I
but
didn't literally fill out the questionnaire, but I thought it really did a very positive purpose of framing, thinking how when we went through this, when I went through this, framing how to look at it. So I thought it would benefit.
Now, most of the next pages is just talking about the planning areas, which we already got it covered. So unless there was additional comments on those pages, which goes through 60. 65. Oh, on page, I bounced around here, but like on page 65, the downtown neighborhood mixed use. You make reference to the civic and the parks. And I'm certain in some other section, we're probably gonna talk more about the actual, all the individual parks that we have. Because, we have a number of those, the Village Square was, he referenced, but you've got that new, the kids park, whatever there's no name to it, I don't think, but where we put it, what is that? There is a name to it where I call it the kids park, where they put it.
The new playground?
New playground.
Village Square.
But it's still Village Square. The whole thing on both sides is Village Square. Oh, I thought there were three different ones. Okay, I'm sorry. But we are, and then we also highlight the fact that we're currently putting improvements in there with enhancing, that, so it is something that's already currently being done as far as focusing and building it out. And then, right, basically those charts take us through page 74. And then I don't know if people who live here obviously know this, but when we talk about the coastal dunes and the peninsula side, it is somewhat unique that is part of the city of Saugatuck, but you literally have to drive out of the city of Saugatuck through the village of Douglas, the city village of Douglas, to get back into the city of Saugatuck. It's
Or you have to swim.
you have to swim or you take the shade ferry if you're not driving, but it's, I thought it makes it somewhat unique. And when you talk about it kind of being like a suburb, you do feel, you're in the city of Saugatuck, but you always feel like it's different, on that side of the river. And then on the West Riverfront residential, you said there's, this kind of relates, I forgot to mention this earlier, you got limited, you talk about parking, you say limited on-site parking only. Majority of those houses along Park Street, not a majority, but a lot of them, they actually park right along the side of the road because they really don't have garages or space. So that was just kind of noted. And on the coastal dune.
They're all parking.
Exactly.
And
And on the coastal dune page on 77, what percentage of the coastal dune residential is like preservation land? Obviously that whole section you've got the dune grass, which had a huge amount of preservation. And then of course you got the whole Oxbow area. I was just curious about that and it's probably one of the.
You mean that's under easement? That's conservation easement?
Yeah.
I'm suggesting Tom Woods,
Cause,
the Harbor National Area.
right. And I was just wondering like what percentage of that,
Percentage wise?
of that coastal dune residential, like what percentage of that would be in some type of conservation or in some type of preservation? Yeah. Because when somebody looks at this, oh my God, that's a huge amount of land and, it's coastal dune residential, but you can't have residential on the majority of that land. Even though it's all kind of highlighted as that. So that's the only thing I was highlighting there.
yeah, we can certainly make note of that, and using GIS, we can probably come up with some pretty good estimates.
Right.
David, can I make one comment too, just about it's antiquated too, because that's from our old zoning maps, but Commissioner Gardner, Councilman Gardner just mentioned Talmadge Woods. And on our zoning map, that is treated as township when it is city property. It's just to that little peninsula just to the east of where the Pawtucket Harbor Natural is. Even on our current zoning map, we do not have it like incorporated into the city of Saugatuck. Yeah, that area, unless I'm wrong, but I think. that's right.
Crow's Nest Trail is Saugatuck.
Yeah, that's that whole peninsula should be Saugatuck,
That's what I thought too.
but for whatever reason, we kind of, yeah. But that's a carryover, so that's another new picture from the last time too.
Right. And again, I think it's all being kind of called coastal dune residential, but there's such a large part of it that's really not available for residential. Is Riverside Drive the city of Saugatuck? All of it is,
Cut off as a street.
right, so they are, okay.
Yeah.
I see on page 78, it refers to an existing land use map, which isn't here. I assume that's just a placeholder for putting one in.
We Grayson did develop a draft of that, so that's something that the narrative is based on that, but we will have that in the next draft.
Okay. On mine, I jumped all the way to page 80. I thought it was interesting when we were talking about, or not 80, I'm sorry, page 81, which is 51 underneath the wayfinding. This is, I know it's been discussed within city council stuff too. You know, it's almost like one of the goals that we'd have to have is how do we better let people know, like you made reference to some of these trails, you know, that more people may use them if you actually had better, like, you know, wayfinding to let them know where they are. I think, you know, we're finding like with the new interurban loop, you know, it's like, okay, now how do you publicize that so more and more people know about it? But so I kind of thought that eventually that's going to end up being one of the goals that we would kind of have at the end of the master plan is a recommendation for better wayfinding.
Yeah, wayfinding in town, but also, for example, Fishtown Trail, there's no sign. Looks like a private driveway unless you take the turn and you go up there and there it is.
The number of people who are walking, let's say, from the high school parking lot to try to get to Butler, who have no idea how to get there.
Correct.
The number of times that I'm in my partner's like station or on our front porch in Brandon, Maine, people say, how do we get this? And so, you know, if there's wayfinding, and it's fascinating because it's a grid, but I remember before I lived here, I would get lost on the hill. And, but the number of people who simply park and don't know how to get downtown, is astonishing.
And what throws a lot of people off, because I remember when I first came, is you know the lake is west. You know, but then you have this river out here. The river technically runs north and south, but people see the water and they're like, okay, which direction am I going? You know, and it's because they don't realize you go up and then you cut back out unless you live here. But even for like wayfinding, I was thinking about what they, since they're gonna start using the high school, especially during the summer months for like the making the loop, they almost need like a little map right there, you know, where you can say you are here and it kind of shows you the map of downtown and where the stops are gonna be, you know, just, I think if people got out and they looked at that, they would say, oh, okay, if I want to walk, here's two ways I can go to it, yeah.
But also where the stairs are when you're going down the hill, if you don't know that that's how you're supposed to get down, you're not sure, am I supposed to use that? Or, so some kind of a classy indication there would be not a bad
I
idea.
think there's modern technology that somehow enable that. I don't know, I'm.
Sure.
But, and flip the side.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. But another aspect is people who, especially after a few pops, can't find their car again. I mean, it's,
What street did I park on?
You are here. That can be kind of
Yeah,
much fun.
would.
And I'll get to that a little bit, and maybe we can here, because we've talked about that with the parking passport.
Yeah, all right.
I'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can incorporate the weight, yeah.
Right. But I thought because I literally that wayfinding, it brought many things up in my mind where I was like, oh, we could probably do a better job. And I know it's been discussed with parking, it's been discussed with council. But that's something that when we start looking at action items, I think we definitely want to talk about.
And I'm 100% supporting wayfinding, but I just want to say literally 100 different ways you can take a phone, right? Geolocation at your phone. People that walk around and help you. I mean, I don't know how many times I get stopped in the street and say, hey, how do I find this place? And they give me, if I'm walking that way, I walk them or I'm pointing where they need to go. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a sign, a permanent sign.
Right.
It could be other ways to direct people.
Could be QR codes in today's world.
It could be chalking on the sidewalk. I mean,
That's not a bad idea.
I understand.
You know, there's different ways to
Mhm.
tell people how to get to where they need to go without making it seem like it's a.
Big sign, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want an overabundance of signs. I
No,
agree with
no.
that.
That's why I said, sorry.
Anyone else have other items as we move through their last pages? I didn't have anything else on mine, but. Nope. All right, do we quickly want to jump back into Grayson's questions and did people have a chance to fill those out? What information and trends stood out to you? I think we've already discussed a lot of them. I thought the vacancy numbers, second home, aging population. Any data surprise you? For me, it really was. I think for the city of Sagatuck, it didn't. I think the growth of Township and Douglas, seeing that numbers, I think seeing the projections kind of surprised me.
I in my mind thought we were around 900 people. I was surprised we're under 800.
That was good, all right.
That surprised me.
Do these chapters reflect the community input received from the surveys? I thought it did. I thought the survey part was very well covered.
Mhm.
Are the community themes or perspectives are the community themes or perspectives that deserve greater emphasis? I think Mark had brought up, the history, maybe a little bit more on the LGBTQ. Percentage of preservation, like we were just talking about on the one side. Also, how you can recognizing that growth in other communities is kind of what I had. Anybody else have other things there? Kind of top of the planning areas, I think we kind of hit on those and the Mason. Street was probably the biggest things that we saw. We've already kind of touched on that. If anyone did the exercise, I struggled to figure out like what were the 5 words that were most important. But did anybody take a look at those?
I didn't get that.
Okay,
I saw it and I was just like, oh, that was too hard.
I know. Cause I was like, I was struggling with many of them. That's kind of like waterfront, natural, small town, charming, but almost every one of them could kind of relate, but. I think you're just trying to get some ideas as the words that we most want you to use. If you guys have ideas on those, send them over to Grayson. The strengths we should preserve. I think a lot of that survey kind of covered that, the preservation, the small town feel. A little more of the focus on the arts and our culture, controlled growth. And then challenges, we talked about waysiding, walkability. Transition to tourist and just things that I had. Dave, do you have anything that you would like from us before we kind of move forward?
No, I think this has been really helpful. I think if you are willing to do it, if you'd like to mark up some of the pages of the report, like especially the character analysis, if Grace and I are obviously taking notes and probably look back at this video as well. But if as you work through these chapters, either on these ones or future, feel free to mark them up too and write your notes out and get them over to Grace. And that's another good way to get us information.
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Okay.
And if you guys have any historical knowledge, it seems like you guys are very aware of the history of Sagatuck. So if you could send any of that my way, I'm searching for it.
Yeah. And again, just trying to, we're not gonna make it the history center, but
Answering me.
a few extra paragraphs would probably be great.
I tried.
In just thinking about like folks to talk to, if as we distribute these chapters, if you read a paragraph and say, hey, you really need to talk to this person, that's who we can include as a stakeholder for interviews. And so Maybe it's just as needed and as names come up to give us good background on a specific topic as we move forward with these chapters.
I think it might be worthwhile, getting a hold of the ED of the History Center and just say, hey, can you give us a skinny on? Show him this and say, okay, is there something glaring that's missing from the city of Saugatuck?
I did actually send over the
Okay.
whole section of the history. I was just waiting to kind of hear back from them.
Super.
And I don't know if it would be worth it all, but mentioning, the greater emphasis on the LGBTQ community. And I think a good thing to look at is kind of how the CVB has changed their marketing. I feel like they have directed more towards that community and maybe just looking at that a little more and how we can implement that better into our plan and kind of use it to guide us.
Sure. They changed their.
Yeah, they've got a lot more.
Between Felicia and there was in between and they're oh, great. Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Human Rights Campaign, which is the largest political organization in Washington for gay and lesbian, they just came out with a new line of T-shirts, and it's the 7 most highly concentrated cities. So it's Provincetown. They got a T-shirt that has like the emblem and it says Provincetown, Key West, Saugatuck's one of the 7. It's Palm Springs, Key West, Provincetown. I forget the other one, but it was like all of a sudden I was looking at them going, wait, they're actually doing a T-shirt that says Saugatuck, Michigan. It says and it says underneath it, it says the Arc Coast of Michigan. And so, yeah. And they've got like 5 million, but anyhow. So David, on the, one of the things that I know we didn't cover, but you guys actually had in here that complete agenda with the future chapters. Which I thought they looked good. We probably need, a consensus at some point if we're in agreement on those. But are we going to have a future chapter for like next month's meeting?
Yeah. Grace and I were thinking we could probably get about 3 chapters per meeting. So the
Okay.
next meeting we could really shoot to get you housing and neighborhoods, chapter 4,
Yes.
mobility and connectivity, chapter 5. I think those really go hand in hand a bit.
So do I.
We could probably even get into natural resources a bit, but I think between the next 2 meetings, get through the bulk of the remaining chapters, then that would leave us with future land use and implementation, which I think are really the kind of the concluding conversations of the process.
Right. Yeah, because chapter 6 and chapter 7, I think, go together very well, because one is like talking about the park, recreation, and waterfront and natural environment resiliency. But okay. So we will have in each of the next few months, 2 or 3 chapters we'll be looking at.
Yep. Grace and I chat about it. I watched your meeting from last month and understand we need to keep the momentum moving now. And so I think we got a good cadence going and we're just going to keep rolling with the chapters.
Great. I thought it was good. And it was great that we didn't have a lot of other things that we had to have on the agenda, so we could really make this much more focused on kind of without a need for a special meeting. Anything else on new business items? If not, we'll move on. There was no old business. There was no communication. Letters in to be distributed. Want to give us an update on the parking task force?
Yeah, 2 more meetings in July and August, so we're getting closer to the deliverable. I believe this past week they did their final kind of parking inventory. The group that we're using is to just kind of get habits and turn over, so we should have that data coming out soon. But just kind of the way ahead, and I think what is going to be pitched to city council, so more debate is kind of the recommended actions going forward are going to be refrain from paid parking and structured parking, and then kind of an explanation as to why. Strengthen enforcement practices and have kind of an ambassador program, so uniform personnel can point out parking, we can enforce the 3-hour limits where applicable. And then just doing a better job of expanding remote parking and trying to do, expand into urban operations, maybe share parking agreements with certain lots where we can have the interurban. And then finally, a big thing is going to be improved signage and wayfinding and just making that better. So at this time, I don't think we're going to propose anything drastic for city council, but there is a lot of things that have been considered, alternatives that will be part of this greater packet, and I think that some of those should be chewed on and digested by council. Some of the bigger ones like one-way streets in some areas, not increase parking, but I don't know if anyone's had any comments on anything they've seen or heard from it, or anything that you'd like to carry forward.
So are you guys agnostic on, for example, one-way Butler and kicking it to council because it's too big of a policy decision? Or are you guys as a group saying, we think that's a step too far?
I think as a group, it is very open to, I think, and support, because I think a lot of members are, hey, if we're here to get increased parking, this is something that is going to do that. But I believe that it was a very, I guess, elementary survey in a sense, because they don't do that for the streets, so the city would really need to get some engineers to map it out and see what is actually feasible and what will get, of course, require more money, more studies.
Okay.
So I just don't think that we have the concrete data to be like, yes, let's do it, and this is how much we can get. So there's more, but it definitely is a lot of support.
Okay.
In that regard, it's a dead issue about in-street seating for restaurants, as in.
So I know that some members of the commission have feelings on it. We've received some correspondence about how it's being against it, but I think how we've kind of looked at that is. It's 10, 12 spaces, it's a policy decision of the council, so. It's one of those things, this is we know how many spaces it's taking up at this time, and I don't think we have
That's great.
any sort of recommendation on it. But we have received correspondence, and there's a lot of feelings about whether or not we should still have it.
Great, thank you. Well, then, we do have public comment, but once again, we have no one in the room, and we do have one individual online. Paul, if you had any comment, this would be an opportunity. Otherwise, I don't see a hand raised, so we will close out the public. I'm sorry.
There was the discussion of a special meeting for early August, not happening.
Now we don't need it.
Okay, good.
And then, so I close out public comments. We'll go around to commissioner comments. We'll start down at the end with Chris, because we haven't heard as much from him as we did myself and everybody else tonight.
It was kind of all around the place, but I thought it was a good project. You made good progress on these 3 chapters. I like that. You're doing good.
Russ?
The only comment I have is on the parking and improvements task force. I've been keeping a close eye on it, and I really appreciate the fact that there seems to be this emphasis on nothing major needs to be done. There needs to be better management. That's been my position all along, is that we don't have a capacity issue, we've got a management issue. That seems to be the direction they're moving. So I look forward to seeing the report and hearing the final say on it. So.
Nice.
Great discussion as always. Wanted to take a moment to recognize Saugatuck's one of Saugatuck's newest residents, potentially the youngest, my daughter Daphne Marino, who was born on July 6th. And I think it's just it's good for us to, especially as we talk about this master plan.
Yes.
And just a good framing for us. And not only are we looking at the present and 5-10 years, but this generation that's coming behind us. And although I grew up in Saugatuck, I had no intention of returning here, but as we've all kind of talked about, there's this it factor, this magic about this place, and we just all need to keep that in mind as we continue working our way through this and finding a way to preserve that and keep people coming back. So yeah, great discussion.
Very good.
That's a good perspective. I thought it was a really good first 3 chapters. I'm looking forward to, I was really impressed. And I'm looking for, and this is what we're supposed to be, I month after month, I think this is what we're supposed to be doing, and we're doing it, and I think it's great, so.
Yeah, I have exactly the same view. Great work on the first 3 chapters. And what a relief to have a meeting where pretty much all we're doing is the master plan, no distractions. We had plenty of time. I mean, we used all the time, but we needed it. So if we'd had something else, it would have
Changed everything.
Jammed it
short.
up.
Yeah. So, yep.
I echo those, a very good meeting, good focus on the master plan. Also to Grayson, I really liked the survey and the way you presented that. It gave us time to look through things and answer it. So I like the way that worked for this exercise. So I look forward to seeing more of those maybe. Is it?
Mine would be exactly the same. It was a good meeting. I love the fact that we didn't have to have a special meeting because we were able to focus this entire meeting on it. No one would felt like, okay, let's try to get out of here within an hour. We spent the full 2 hours kind of really looking at it. I think we made a lot of headway. And I feel good about it, and we're happy we got our new resident of Sagatuck. So our population actually went up by at least one. And congratulations to you, Olivia.